So there I was, 9 p.m., empty office, just me, a cold cup of coffee, and a man on my screen getting betrayed by the one person he actually loved. Classic Tuesday at a game development company. The guy didn't even react the way a normal person would. He just looked up at her, smiled like he was totally fine with everything, and whispered his last words. His last words, by the way, were not inspiring, not poetic, not memorable in a good way. They were just, damn witch. And then he was gone. I leaned back in my chair, cracked my knuckles, and exhaled like a man who had watched the same scene 16 times into weeks. Finally, no lag this time. Yeah, I'm a game tester. My name is Kim Eugen, and watching fictional villains die over and over in elaborate cutscenes is genuinely what I get paid to do. The dead man on screen was named Ukline von Grahan Ukline. Mid-tier villain, important enough to have his own story arc, important enough to have named dialogue, important enough to die meaningfully. He had 6 core traits, 13 personality tags, rank 6 ability tier, and a death rate of approximately 100% across every test run this entire company had ever logged. We had run this game over 1,000 times between all the testers. Ukline survived exactly once, one time, out of 1,000. That's not a character, that's a countdown timer with a face. And the thing about Ukline, the thing I didn't know yet, was that somebody here thought it would be funny to model this doomed, despised, universally hated villain directly after me. I was going to find that out very soon. I was not going to enjoy finding it out, Eugen. A voice came from behind me. Familiar. To familiar. I spun the chair around and there she was, Uera, standing in the doorway of my office at 9 in the evening like this was completely unremarkable. No makeup, hair naturally perfect, eyes big even without anything done to them. Annoyingly, effortlessly beautiful in a way that should require more effort. Her name was Uera. She was the head of my division. She was also, as of 6 months ago, my ex-girlfriend. Both of these things were true at the same time. Welcome to my life. We had dated for 3 years before that. 3 years of late nights in this exact building, shared deadlines, arguing about game mechanics, and knowing each other's habits better than our own. Then we broke up. Nobody's fault exactly. We just stopped being the right shape for each other. She was a natural workaholic. I was a natural at existing comfortably without ambition. Her drive to improve pushed me to become someone who could at least pay rent. But in the end, she couldn't accept that I wasn't going to become something more than that. And honestly, I didn't want to die so. 6 months of silence on the personal side. 2 months of her being my department head. 0 conversations about any of it. Totally normal workplace situation. How's the testing going? She asked, walking over to my desk like she belonged there. Which, to be fair, she kind of did. This was her team's project. Still running it, I said, and shrugged. She nodded and looked at my monitor. I looked at her, and then I noticed something around her neck that wasn't there last week. A necklace small delicate. The kind of thing someone buys for someone else when they want to make an impression. My jaw did something involuntary. New boyfriend doing well? I asked, keeping my voice perfectly flat and normal and not at all like I cared about the answer. She paused, and she shrugged. The exact same shrug I had just done. 3 years of dating, and we had completely sensed up our body language without noticing. Pretty well, actually, she said. Things are good. Cool. Great. Amazing. I turned back to my monitor and tapped the mouse with absolutely 0 feelings about anything. She had come by to tell me the lead developer had changed the settings again. New character models needed. Deadline was the same night. I checked the clock. Already 9 p.m. and I hadn't started. I love this job. I love this job so much. You were watching the Ukline scene? She asked, nodding at my screen. The last frame was still frozen. His final words still visible in the corner. Yeah, died at R11 this run, I said. But there are ways to kill him way earlier if you know what you're doing. Some players figure it out in the first couple hours. That's the point, I added. The longer you let Ukline do whatever he wants, the worse he gets. The game basically punishes you for ignoring him. Players control how hard the game is. She looked at the screen for a moment. Then she smirked in that specific way that meant she was about to say something I wasn't ready for. You know the author based Ukline on you, right? I stopped. My hand stopped moving. The mouse stopped. Every single thing in my vicinity just stopped. I turned back to her slowly. Come again? Yeah. That's why I always kill him immediately the second I get the option. She said it like she was commenting on the weather. Like this was obvious information. That makes no sense. I've met the guy twice. I said. We talked for maybe 20 minutes total. There's no way he based a whole character on me from 20 minutes. He visited the studio a few times. Apparently he noticed you. She shrugged again. Our synchronized shrug. He said you to have similar personalities. I looked back at the screen. At Ukline. At the man who just died cursing the woman he loved. At the villain every single player agrees to eliminate as fast as possible. Similar personalities, I repeated slowly. Me. And this guy. The guy whose actual last words in this life were damn witch. You're a light, she said simply. Something in my face must have moved in a very specific way because she actually laughed. Just a little, just briefly, before catching herself. Is that why you broke up with me? The words were out of my mouth before I had made any decision to say them. Zero processing time. Just words. She went completely neutral. The kind of neutral that is somehow worse than any actual expression. I raised both hands before she could say anything. Sorry. Was that pathetic? I asked. That was extremely pathetic, she confirmed, completely without hesitation. No pause. No consideration. Just immediate, clean confirmation. She told me to stop messing around and get started on the new models. Then she turned and walked toward the door. Because she had a car waiting outside. I could see it from the window. I turned back to Ukline's character sheet and started actually reading it for the first time. Instead of just running test scenarios, his trait list looked like this: Villain's Destiny, Prodigy, Mediocre Magic Talent, Aesthetic Sense, Overwhelming Grace, Inflexible Nature, Prodigy, and Mediocre Magic Talent at the same time. Think about what that means. Genius-level intellect in a world built on magic, with actual below-average magical ability. The game literally built a man to suffer. Then his personality tags: elitist, germaphobe, disciplined, ambitious, aristocratic manner, perceptive, controlling, pretentious and decisive, OCD tendencies, atheist. 13 tags, all of them painting a picture of someone who is very impressive and also deeply exhausting to be around. And apparently this is me, according to the author, who met me twice. I stared at Ukline's face on the screen, the face I had modeled myself, coincidentally, and felt something uncomfortable happening in my chest. I am absolutely nothing like this guy, I said clearly to the empty, silent office around me. The empty office offered no opinion either way. I scrolled through the trait and personality lists again, slower this time. Just looking, not doing anything, absolutely just browsing for fun with no intention of changing anything. Then I found one: empathy, listed as a trait, described in the system as something close to deep understanding of others, but coded as a trait rather than a personality tag, which was unusual. With this, at least you wouldn't be completely insufferable, I said. And before I had consciously decided to do it, I had already dragged it into Ukline's active trait list. Then, just for fun, just to see how it looked: born rich, Midas touch, clear vision, Iron Man, and a couple more that felt right in the moment. I added about 5 traits total. Nothing crazy, nothing that would obviously break anything. Just small things, buried under everything else, that might quietly change how his story went. I leaned back, the chair creaked. The office was silent except for the sound of the building's ventilation system. 7 years, I said to nobody. That's the number. 7 years since I first met you, Era. 3 of those years dating. 6 months of pretending I was completely fine. She had been getting ready for the breakup for a long time before it actually happened. I could see it clearly now. Looking back, she had been slowly building distance. I just hadn't noticed any of it, because I wasn't looking for it. That's the thing. I don't notice change until it's already finished happening. That's the thing about me. Maybe. I don't notice things changing until they've already finished changing. By the time I realize something is different, it's been different for months. She stood at that doorway, the one she just walked out of, and she was about to say something. I could tell. Her mouth opened, then it closed, then she looked away. I knew her habits too well not to see it. Era, I said, we've known each other for a long time. Whatever you want to say, just say it. She looked at me for a moment with an expression I couldn't quite read. Then she smiled, a small, tired, real smile, and said never mind and walked out. The click of her heels on the floor got quieter, then gone. She was the best person I'd ever met. Not because she was perfect, she was stubborn and demanding and sometimes impossible, but because she was genuinely, completely real. No performance, no pretending. And she had decided, at some point over the past few years, that I wasn't going to be the person she needed. And she was probably right. I sighed at my monitor. Ukline stared back at me from the screen, freshly edited, slightly better traded than before. At least one of us is getting improvements today. I told him ding. I nearly fell off the chair. The notification sound on the internal company messenger is genuinely too loud, and one day I will file a complaint about it. The message was from Lane. Lane was the lead developer, the head of the AI department, and a far national whose last name I had never successfully pronounced. He was also the single most unpredictable person in this building. Lane, Eugen, you still working? Me, yeah. If you need model changes, just send the specs. I'll start right now. 3 dots appeared, then. Lane, nah, not about that. Just watching. Waiting for something. I stopped reading. Read it again. Watching. He's watching. What is he watching? Is he watching me? I physically turned around and looked at the office behind me. Empty desks. Dark monitors. A sad little plant in the corner that nobody had watered into weeks. 0 people. Me. Watching what exactly? Are you watching me right now? The response took about 3 seconds. Then a smiling emoji appeared, followed by, Lane. No, not you. Look out your window. I turned toward the window without thinking about it. Automatic response. Like a command had been sent directly to my body. The sky outside was regular. Normal night sky. City lights below. Nothing interesting above. And then it wasn't. Light cracked across the glass in lines I had never seen before. Not exactly like lightning. More like seams splitting open in something that was supposed to be seamless. Like something underneath the surface of the sky was trying to push through from the other side. And the sky was losing the argument. Then the light came through the glass and directly into the room where I was sitting. Without asking, without warning, just through. I have tried to describe what happened next and I don't have good words for it. There was a sound. Then the sound stopped. Then there was light everywhere. Coming from no direction specifically, just everywhere at once. And then there was nothing, just nothing. Quiet. Dark. The sensation of falling without moving. I woke up somewhere else. White ceiling above me, heavy curtains on tall windows, a room so large and so expensively furnished that it took me a full 10 seconds to process that I was inside a building at all. My head felt like someone had rearranged its contents without asking. I sat up slowly and immediately noticed that my hands looked wrong. Not injured, not damaged, just different, longer fingers, paler skin, the kind of hands that belong in a painting of an aristocrat, not on a guy who eats convenience store rice for dinner 3 nights a week. I stood up, found a mirror on the far wall because of course there was a mirror in this room. A room like this always has mirrors. I looked at my reflection. Dark hair, sharp jaw, features arranged with a kind of precision that doesn't happen by accident. The kind of face that makes other people nervous without meaning to. I knew this face. I had stared at this face on a monitor for weeks. I had adjusted the shading on this face's cheekbones. I had told my coworker the nose was slightly asymmetrical and we had fixed it together. I had built this face. My mouth opened. Nothing came out for a moment. Then no, absolutely not. One was Decline von Grahan Ukline, the villain, the mid-boss, the man who exists in this game to be a problem for everyone around him and then die before the story reaches its conclusion. I was the character with the 1 in 1,000 survival rate. The character my ex-girlfriend admitted to killing immediately every single playthrough. The character every experienced player learns to eliminate early, because leaving him alive in this world only makes everything significantly and painfully worse. And I had, just before passing out in my office, given this character 5 brand new traits that the original developers never intended him to have, including empathy, which I had selected while thinking at least you won't be completely insufferable. About myself, accidentally. This was my situation. The good news, I knew this game better than almost anyone alive. I had tested every major story branch, watched every named character's arc, and understood exactly how the world worked. The bad news, in the vast majority of those branches, I die. Sometimes early, sometimes late, sometimes dramatically, and sometimes completely off-screen. But almost always, I die. There were named characters in this world who had been waiting their entire lives to get to me. A fiancé who despised me. A woman whose father I had apparently destroyed professionally. A mysterious knight who followed the fiancé like a shadow and spent most of his screen time imagining how he would end my life. These were not hypothetical problems. These were people I had helped write, who had real grievances and real power, and were already somewhere in this world sharpening their goals. And me, I was a game tester from soul and a body built for a villain. In a world that ran on magic I had below average talent for, with a personality system that was already trying to turn me into someone I was not. Every time I looked in this mirror, I could feel the posture adjusting on its own, spine straight, chin up, shoulders set in a way I had never naturally carried myself. The expression on this face kept settling into something composed and cold. That had nothing to do with how I actually felt. 13 personality tags, quietly winning. I slapped myself across the face, not hard, just enough to remind the face in the mirror who was actually living behind it. My name is Kim Yujin, I said to my reflection. I am a 20-something game tester who eats too much convenience food and once cried at a dog food commercial. I am not this guy. The reflection looked unconvinced, but didn't argue. Okay. So. New situation, new world, same me. Probably, hopefully, mostly. The question wasn't whether I could survive. The question was how. Because in this game, survival didn't happen by accident. It happened through very specific choices made at very specific moments. And I had approximately 7 days before the first of those critical moments would arrive and force me to make a choice that actually mattered. If you want to find out what a man does when he wakes up inside a game designed to kill him, don't go anywhere, because it gets a lot more interesting from here. A week passed. 7 full days of lying in this enormous bed, staring at this expensive ceiling, trying to figure out if any of this was actually real. I ran every option I could think of, like a person who debugs systems for a living and cannot stop applying that to personal crises. Option 1, regular dream. I pinch myself every single morning for 5 days straight, still in the same room every time, still Decline's face in the mirror, Ruled out completely. Option 2. Lucid dream. I tried to reshape the room with my mind. The room did not reshape. The curtains stayed exactly where they were. The ceiling was unmoved by my intention. Ruled out. Option 3. Elaborate simulation or virtual reality situation. Possible, technically, but unfalsifiable, which makes it useless as a working theory when you need to make actual decisions. Option 4. I got struck by lightning at my office desk. My body died. And this is some form of continuation. Currently the leading hypothesis. Not comfortable to sit with, but it fits the available data. Conclusion: after 7 days, I was Ukline von Grahan Ukline, the villain in the game, for real. With no obvious way back, the character I had built, tested, watched die 16 times across different playthroughs, and quietly edited the night before everything went sideways. That was me now. My hands down my face, my address, and the first real problem wasn't even the existential part. It wasn't the 17 people in this game who had reasons to want me dead. The first real problem was something much more immediate. I had canceled a week of university lectures. Ukline was a senior professor at the Imperial University. It was his identity, his power base, his entire reason for existing on campus. And for 7 days, I had just not done that, which was apparently noticeable. I found this out at the exact moment the bedroom door opened without any knock. "What?" said the woman in the doorway, in a tone that was not actually asking a question. "Are you doing? What are you actually doing right now?" This was Uriel, Ukline's younger sister. Short black haircut, clean, sharp eyes. The kind of presence that recalibrates a room just by entering it. She was holding a stack of papers and radiating the specific energy of someone who had been building to this for several days and was finally here. The maids in the corridor behind her were doing their absolute best to appear non-existent. Professional survival instinct. I respected it. I said carefully, that if I just rested a little longer, I would eventually wake up back in my normal situation. Back at my desk, back in Seoul. "You have been in this bed," Uriel said, "for 1 entire week. You canceled your lectures. You have barely eaten. The staff are convinced something catastrophic happened with your engagement." I looked at the ceiling. The staff were not entirely wrong. Something had definitely happened, just not specifically with the engagement. Uriel crossed the room, dropped the stack of papers onto my chest like she was filing something, and stood over me with her arms folded. She had the particular energy of someone who had already decided how this conversation was going to end and was simply waiting for me to catch up. "There is an event at the university today. You agreed to it personally. If you skip this one, you embarrass the family, you embarrass the university, and you lose the professorship that you have spent years building. Is that what you want?" I sat up and picked up the papers. Top document, lecture schedule. My name printed at the heading, today's date. Title of the session written in clean formal text at the center. Imperial Senior Professor. Ukline. Fundamentals of Magic and Mana Application. I read it twice, then I read it a third time. Slowly, I stared at that title. I had actually read documentation on this exact topic during testing. Background lore for a quest line. I had read it because reading every lore doc was a personal habit from years of testing, which meant I had a real shot at doing this without embarrassing myself in front of several hundred people. Possibly, probably, hopefully. Going through lore documents thoroughly was an old habit from testing, which meant I might, possibly, actually be able to do this. "Alright," I said. "I'll go." Uriel looked at me like I had said something in the wrong language. Agreeing without argument was apparently more alarming than refusing would have been. She left quickly after that, the maids trailing behind her, and I was alone again in a room full of expensive things and one very confusing mirror. I got up, found the bathroom, which was the size of a small apartment, and stood under hot water for a while, which felt normal because water is water regardless of which world you're in. Small mercies. Then I stood at the mirror and looked at this face. Ukline's face. Still sharp, still cold, still carrying that specific quality of someone who has never had to second guess whether they belong somewhere. I could feel the trait system running underneath everything I did, posture locking automatically, instinct toward formality in every movement. There was a faint background discomfort at anything that felt undignified or imprecise. 13 tags, all active, all doing their job. 13 personality tags active, running like background software I had not chosen to install and could not figure out how to uninstall. Kim Yujin, I said quietly to the mirror, just to say it, just to check that I still knew it. The reflection said nothing and looked only partially convinced. I went to the wardrobe, its own separate room, larger than my old apartment back home, and chose based on instinct. Dark navy suit, white shirt, blue tie, coat that moved well. Then I fixed my hair so it looked like a decision and not an accident. And I looked at the result, and I understood something I hadn't understood from the testing side of this game. This face, this suit, this posture combined, it projected something specific. The kind of thing that makes other people unconsciously reassess how they're going to approach a conversation before it starts. I was going to use that advantage, deliberately, for as long as I had access to it, and it kept working the way it was currently working. The car outside was vintage in design, an early automobile era model, the kind of vehicle that functions as a status signal in this world, the same way certain things do back home. My assistant was already seated in the back of the car, waiting. His name was Alan, and he had apparently been working under Decline for 3 years. His name was Alan. He had been working under Decline for 3 years, according to the personnel information I had found in the desk drawer the night before. I had not modeled Alan. I had not modeled Alan during development. He did not appear in any test run I could remember. He was, from my perspective, a completely unknown variable. He was sitting with a hood pulled over most of his face and a stack of documents held against his chest like armor against incoming fire. "Good afternoon, Professor," he said, in the voice of someone pre-apologizing for something they haven't done yet. "You're with the Midge Tower?" I asked, because his coat had the crest. Yes, sir, I am. I have been. I've worked under you for 3 years, so I know yes, Professor." That was just a question, I said, and kept my voice even. I was asking, not testing you. You can relax. He looked like I had addressed him in a foreign language. He looked like I had addressed him in a different language. Based on what I knew about Decline, relax was probably not a word that had appeared in their conversations before. Alan handed me the lecture documents and went quiet. I went through them. He had prepared a full outline, opening, main content, supporting examples, conclusion, every element covered and organized clearly. "You put this together yourself?" I asked. "Yes, Professor." "Good work," I said, and meant it and turned back to reading. From under the hood, Alan made a sound that was nearly inaudible. I glanced over. His hood had shifted slightly. His expression was doing something involuntary, the look of a person who has received something unexpected and genuinely does not know what to do with it. We drove through the city, and I watched it through the glass. The world design team had built this from centuries of historical reference material, and from inside it the work was different than it was on a monitor. The streets had texture. The light moved correctly. The architecture made sense as a place where actual people live rather than as a backdrop for quests. Our team had built this. I had run test paths through these streets, and from this side, it was completely different. The Imperial University appeared through the window, and I straightened up. Before I had consciously decided to. The main gate, the statue of the first emperor, the ground spreading out behind it, research halls, training spaces, gardens, lecture buildings, all of it in afternoon light. The Midge Tower stood at the center of the campus, 77 floors. Visible from anywhere on the grounds, the tallest structure in the university. I had a desk on floor 77. The lecture hall, Roteo Hall, named after the Ukline family donation that funded its construction a decade ago, was already close to full when we arrived. Several hundred people, students, knights, researchers, and observers who had simply wanted to see what a senior professor lecture looked like in person. Cameras in the style that existed in this world. I stepped onto campus and felt immediately what I hadn't been able to feel from the testing side. People adjusted around this character. Not just deference, something more instinctive than that. They shifted their paths, gave space, recalibrated their body language. The air around Decline had a specific effect on other people's behavior, and it was apparently still working. I walked toward Roteo Hall. Alan kept pace a step behind me, and I noticed the pace that felt natural in this body was slower than I would normally walk. Deliberate, measured, the kind of movement that communicates arrival rather than hurry. Decline did not rush anywhere. Inside, I walked to the front of the hall. I looked at the room. The room looked back at me with a few hundred sets of eyes. I touched the crystal on the podium. The room went quiet. "I will begin the lecture now," I said, and touched the crystal on the podium. The room shifted into listening, and then I started talking, and it worked. The comprehension trait, the one I had thought was similar to empathy when I added it in my office, turned out to be something much more specific and much more useful than I had realized. It processed information. That was its function. Give it a concept, and it would find the internal logic of the concept, break it apart, make it workable. I had read Alan's lecture notes for 30 minutes in the car, and by the time I stood at the podium I understood the material well enough to teach it without notes. Magic is organized into 3 attributes and 9 types, I said. The hall lights dimmed on a gesture automatic. The body knew the system without being told. A magic formula appeared in the air above the hall. 3 is dimensional, slowly rotating. The room responded with a sound. The hall made a sound, 300 people reacting to a visual they had not expected, and then settling back into attention. Good start. I went through it methodically. Attributes and types. The logic of mana distribution through the body. Head for complex formula work, heart for broad distribution, abdomen for universal access. 40 minutes. Structured, clear, following the internal logic of each point without losing the thread once. The comprehension trait was doing exactly what it said. The formula overhead shifted and changed as I spoke, illustrating each point. I had not consciously operated this system before, but the body apparently had, and it worked. The conclusion is straightforward, I said, near the end. Effort matters, but without the correct natural affinity for a given magic type, effort alone will not compensate. Know your actual attributes. Know your actual type. Work within the strengths you actually have, not the ones you wish you had, not the ones that sound better on paper. The irony of decline. A man with genuinely mediocre magical talent who had built his entire reputation on theoretical expertise. Delivering this particular advice to a room full of students was not lost on me. Almost done. The notes had one final section, open questions. I looked at the hall. If anyone has questions, a hand went up before I finished the sentence. Then the person attached to the hand stood up. She was young, 17, maybe, with light gray hair and green eyes that had a focused, evaluating quality. She had planned to ask this question before she arrived. The certainty in her posture said so. She had not introduced herself. She had simply started talking, moving directly into the question without any preamble. Like the formalities did not apply to her specifically. Professor Decline, an unidentified magic formula, appeared in the men's dormitory last night. People are saying it could be dangerous. Since you're supposedly a genius at magic interpretation, could you? Are you a member of the University Mage Tower? I asked. She stopped talking. Her expression did something confused. What? She said. You stood up and began speaking without introducing yourself, I said, and the room was completely silent. That's a basic breach of academic protocol. I don't respond to questions from students who haven't properly introduced themselves first. That is the academic protocol in this setting, and it applies to everyone equally. Her face went red. The hall made a sound, not laughter exactly, more like the collective exhale of several hundred people who had just watched something land. She hadn't done anything wrong. The question was fair, but the trait system responded on its own, immediately and automatically. Decades of formal academic conditioning built into this character's bones, expressing itself without asking me first. I didn't choose to shut her down. The character did, and beyond the automatic response, there was also a very practical reason I was glad the question got shut down when it did. And there was a practical reason I was glad for the interruption. I checked my mana, 2005 3375ths. 40 minutes of comprehension running through dense technical material had cost me over 1,000 points. Interpreting an unknown formula would cost significantly more than I had available right now. This lecture is concluded, I said, and turned to step down from the podium. Even so, the words came up behind me, clear and carrying, the voice of someone who had decided they were not going to let this end here. I stopped, turned back slowly. She had traced a magic formula in the air from memory, holding it up for the whole hall to see. Her expression said she was not going to sit down until this was addressed. The Mage Tower declined to investigate. They said it was probably just a rumor. But if you're really the expert everyone claims you are, you should be able to identify the type at a glance. The first-year students in the dormitory have been working on this all night, and there's nobody available to help them. The hall was very quiet. I looked at the formula she had drawn. It didn't follow standard geometric logic. Normal magic formulas had recognizable patterns, lines and curves arranged according to type principles. This one looked like separate elements layered over each other without structure. Something organic, not built. The moment I focused on it, comprehension activated without my instruction. Vision sharpened, the formula began to decompose into recognizable elements, processing speed increased, and then it stopped. Hard stop. Mana. 363,375ths. Less than a second. It had burned through almost everything I had left, but it had given me exactly enough. Type. Illusion. Barrier magic. She had asked me to identify the type. That was the question. I had just enough answer. Barrier magic, I said. Illusion subtype. Someone was locking the entrance, not threatening it. It was a seal, not an attack. I paused. Tell the first-year students it's actually a good study case for illusion-type construction logic. They should keep working on it. The gray-haired girl stared at me. The expression on her face went through several things quickly. Disbelief, recalculation, something more complicated underneath both of those. The hall came back to life around her. Sound returning, people turning to each other. The noise of 300 people updating their understanding of something they thought they already knew. I stepped down from the podium and walked out. And the moment I was in the corridor, with nobody watching, I did what I had been preventing myself from doing for the last 40 minutes. I found an empty restroom, confirmed it was actually empty, and scratched my back and neck properly for the first time since I had woken up in this body. The kind of scratch that only happens when you've been waiting for it. Being declined, I said to the restroom wall, is an unreasonable amount of work. 13 personality tags meant 13 categories of automatic behavior correction running at all times. No adjusting your posture in public, no fidgeting, no scratching, no rolling your shoulders, no doing any of the small unconscious physical things that normal people do constantly. Because they're allowed to, everything deliberate, everything composed. The body would follow the tags whether I agreed or not. I fixed my coat, straightened everything that needed straightening, and walked back out into the corridor looking like a man who had never needed to scratch anything in his life. At the far end of the corridor, where the hallway opened into a wider passage near the main stairs, I saw her standing still, watching. White hair, light, clear eyes, the specific kind of stillness that belongs to someone who has thought through a situation completely and arrived at a decision they are at peace with. I knew who this was before she spoke. I had helped write her story. I had watched the cutscene where this moment played out in a completely different way. She saw me and walked forward, and when the distance between us was right, she stopped and said, quiet, formal, measured, "It has been a while." Her name was Julie Von D. Freyden, Decline's fiancée, the woman who, in 8 of the 16 playthroughs I had personally run, was the direct cause of this character's death. And she was looking at me right now with an expression I couldn't quite read, waiting for something specific. Something Decline had apparently promised her, something I had no record of anywhere in my memory. I needed to handle this with a great deal more care than I had handled anything else today, and I was starting from zero, because I had absolutely no idea what promise she was waiting on. Julie was looking at me like she was waiting for something I had already agreed to deliver. Her expression was patient in a way that was somehow worse than if she had been angry. Her eyes were calm. That was the part that was hard to read. Not angry, not cold, just waiting. The way a person waits when they have already accepted the most likely outcome, but are allowing for one alternative. I did not know what promise Decline had made her. I had zero record of it. Whatever conversation had happened between them before I arrived in this body, I had missed it completely. "It has been a while," she said again, quietly, like she was giving me a second chance to start this correctly. I looked at her and made a decision in about 3 seconds. The only honest move available to me right now was the one that bought time without lying outright. "The last few days have been difficult," I said. "There are some things I don't remember clearly." Julie studied my face. "You don't remember the promise." It wasn't a question. She had read the answer directly off my face before I had a chance to compose a better expression, which told me she was significantly more perceptive than I had accounted for. This woman was sharp in a way the game documentation had described, but I had not fully appreciated until this exact moment. Standing in a corridor with her eyes on me, "I had a fever," I said, keeping my voice level. "Several days of it. Some of the recent details are not entirely clear to me right now." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she exhaled, not a sigh exactly, more like someone releasing a decision they had been holding for a while. "That was your last chance," she said. Quiet. Final. Not cruel, just honest. "I want you to understand that. I had decided that if you kept your word today, I would stand by you regardless of what the family said. But you don't even remember what you promised." She looked at me one more time. Then she stepped aside. "You can go." And she meant it. I stood there a moment after she walked away. The conversation had just taught me something important, and also made my situation significantly more complicated at the same time. But I had learned something. The timeline had already shifted. The sequence I had memorized was not the one I was living in. A 2-4-1. Wonderful. In the actual documented story, Julie's decision point came much later. The moment where she fully committed to ending things was supposed to happen after a specific chain of events. A confrontation, a revelation, a choice he made in front of witnesses. That was the sequence as written. But before I arrived in this body, Decline had apparently already changed the conditions. But apparently, before I arrived in this body, Decline had done something, made some promise that had moved her timeline up. She was already at the decision point. She had already decided, which meant the sequence I knew was already off. The playthrough I had memorized was not the one I was living in, and that meant I could not rely on the timeline the way I had been planning to. I walked back through the corridor and found Alan near the exit with the car keys. He had the specific expression of someone who had quietly prepared for the possibility that things went wrong. "How was the meeting?" he asked, very carefully. It was the kind of question that isn't actually looking for information, just checking whether you want to talk or not. "How was the meeting?" he asked, very carefully. The kind of question that isn't really asking for information. "Fine," I said. "Let's go to the office." Alan nodded and didn't follow up, which I appreciated more than I could say. The mid-tower elevator opened onto floor 77, and the office was exactly what I had designed it to be. Large, clean, every surface organized. A wall of bookshelves, a desk with exactly the right objects on it, a view from the window that was genuinely one of the better things I had built into this world. I sat down and pulled out the sponsorship book that had been left on my desk. Alan had mentioned it, a list of new med students, their attributes, their magic types, their sponsorship status. Names in clean columns, standard entries for most. Some appeared highlighted in gold, the born rich and clear vision traits running together, flagging anyone worth paying closer attention to. Ifrin Luna, 17 years old, gray hair, green eyes. The girl from the lecture hall, the one who had stood up without introducing herself and then refused to sit back down. Her sponsorship status, 0 million received, out of a maximum 10 million requested. Every other name on the list had received something. She had received nothing at all. I looked at that number for a while. Every other new student had received something, minimum 10,000. Ifrin Luna had received nothing, not a single loan from any professor or investor in the entire tower. Because of decline, because of what this character had done to her father, because his entire academic reputation rested on work he had taken from someone else. And every professor and investor in this tower who knew that history had made sure Ifrin Luna felt the full weight of it while she was here. I pulled up her file and read it. Attributes, magic type, test scores. The clear vision trait processed it without being asked. What it showed me was someone with more raw potential than most of the gold highlighted names. On the entire list, Alan, I said, and he appeared in the doorway within the seconds. Yes, Professor. In the way of a person who had been waiting at careful listening distance. Why does Ifrin Luna have no sponsorship? Alan went very still. The kind of still that means the answer is complicated and the person doesn't know how much to say. It's a known situation, he said, carefully. The other professors and investors saw her file and decided not to support her because of her connection to me. He didn't confirm it out loud. He didn't need to. The specific quality of his silence was confirmation enough. The kind that comes from someone who knows the answer and wishes they didn't. I look back at the file. 10 million own requested, a number that, in context, was either extremely ambitious or the kind of number someone writes when they have nothing to lose and want to see what happens. I'm going to sponsor her, I said. Alan's face immediately did something involuntary. The expression of a person who has just heard something they were not expecting and isn't sure how to respond to it. Professor, anonymously, I said, don't put my name on it. She'll reject it if she knows where it came from. Just process it through a neutral account and flag it as an institutional allocation. Alan stood in the doorway working through it. A few seconds. Then, yes, Professor, I can do that. The tone of someone who had accepted a surprising order and was already figuring out the logistics. Good. And check the other names on this list. Anyone who got passed over because of their association with me. Same process. He nodded and left, and I turned my chair to face the window. The campus spread out below. Gardens, pathways, students moving between buildings in the afternoon light. All of it built by people I used to work with. All of it real in a way that was completely different from testing. When you are inside something, it stops being a backdrop and starts being a place where you actually live. I thought about the Midas touch trait. What it actually did, not the surface description, but the underlying mechanic. It transferred mana into a target and unlocked potential. The target didn't have to agree. The target didn't even have to know. I had used it on a pen in this office to test it. The pen had become better at being a pen. The question was, what happened when you used it on a person? I looked at my mana, still low from the lecture. Mana, 1,103,375, recovering slowly. Not enough to experiment today, but eventually. I turned back to the desk and opened the magic reference books I had asked Alan to bring. Basic volumes, foundational material, earth element, fire element, control type magic. The actual building blocks of what this body could do. I needed to understand them properly, from the ground up, before I tried anything that required them. Because the plan I had been working on in my head required something I didn't have yet, and the only way to get it was to start from the beginning and build it properly. Earth plus fire combined produced metal. Control type magic could manipulate metal at distance, move it, shape it, direct it with intent rather than physical contact. If I could generate the metal and move it with control magic, I had an offensive capability that didn't require strong magical talent, because the talent was in the manipulation, not the generation. It was sword control without a starting sword, or with one I generated myself. The mana cost would be high and the initial results rough, but the concept was structurally sound and I had time to develop it. The mana cost would be significant. The initial output would be rough, but the concept was sound and I had time, and the comprehension trait would help me learn faster than this character was supposed to be able to. I opened the first book and started reading. 2 hours later, Alan knocked and told me the car was ready. I closed the book, marked my place, and stood up. The posture snapped back into position automatically. Spine straight, shoulders set, the whole aristocratic presentation reasserting itself the moment I stopped concentrating on something else. In the lobby, 3 other professors passed heading the other direction. They nodded. I nodded back, the exact correct amount, acknowledging without conceding. The way Decline moved through every social exchange like it was a negotiation he had already won before it started. Outside, walking toward the car, I passed a section of the garden path and saw the gray-haired girl sitting on a bench with a notebook in her lap and an expression that was trying very hard to be neutral about something. Ifrin Luna, still on campus. She saw me at the same moment I saw her. Her expression went from neutral to something that wanted to be hostile but was currently tangled up in the events of the lecture hall. I kept walking. Then I stopped, turned slightly. The formula you drew, I said. Illusion-type barrier. You should look at the internal structure of the binding layer specifically. That's where the originality is. Most first-years miss it. She stared at me. Her mouth did something complicated. I turned back and walked to the car without waiting for a response. Because Decline would not wait for a response. And because I had just given her something useful without explaining why, which was the only kind of help she would currently accept from this face. Alan held the door. I got in. The car pulled away from the campus. Through the window, I could see her still sitting on the bench, looking at the space where I had just been standing, working through something. That was fine. She had time. I had time too. Not infinite time. The timeline was already shifting in ways I hadn't anticipated, and the list of people who wanted this character dead was still exactly as long as it had been this morning. But for tonight, I had made the choices that the real Decline would never have made. One visible, one invisible, one in a hallway, one in a file. Small moves, early moves, the kind that don't look like anything yet. I leaned back in the seat and watched the campus disappear behind us. Alan, I said. Yes, Professor. Good work today. He didn't say anything, but from the front seat, very quietly, I heard him exhale like someone who had been holding their breath for a long time and had finally, carefully, let it go. The mansion was quiet when I got back. That specific kind of quiet that only exists in buildings that are too large for the number of people living in them. Sound doesn't carry. Footsteps disappear into carpet. The whole place just absorbs everything and gives nothing back. Large, quiet, expensive, and completely indifferent to the person standing in it. I went to the study, poured water from the decanter on the desk. Decline apparently didn't drink anything else in the evenings, and sat down with the magic reference books Alan had brought. Earth element, fire element, control type magic. The three things I needed to combine into something that could actually keep this character alive. When the named heroes came looking, I read for 2 hours, and the comprehension trait did what it did, broke everything down, found the internal logic, made it stick faster than normal retention would allow. By the end of the second hour, I understood the foundational theory clearly enough, properly, not just surface level, to attempt something basic without immediately failing. I held out my hand, focused on the two elements simultaneously, earth and fire, pulling mana into both at once, letting them interact at the point where they met. Nothing happened for about 40 seconds. Then a small dark patch appeared in my palm. Rough, uneven, about the size of a coin. Metal, crude, low quality, barely holding its shape, but metal. I stared at it. Then I moved it, just slightly, just a few centimeters. With the control magic, it shifted slowly, like moving something through water that was slightly too thick. It worked. The concept worked. Everything else was just refinement and mana management and time, all of which I had access to, or could get access to. I let the metal dissolve and leaned back. The comprehension trait had burned through another chunk of mana while I was reading, and the metal experiment had cost more on top of that. Mana, 583,375. Getting low, but the path was confirmed. The concept worked. Everything else was refinement, mana management, and time, and I had access to all three. That was what mattered tonight. I closed the books, put them on the shelf in the correct order. The trait system would not allow me to leave them out of order, which was a genuinely strange thing to experience, and went to the window. The city at night, lights from the university still visible in the distance. Below, the street was quiet. No traffic, no movement, just me and the silence, and the fact that I was living inside a story that had been designed to end badly for the character I was currently being. I thought about Julie, about what she had said in the hallway. That was your last chance. About the way she had said it, like she had made peace with the outcome before she arrived at the conversation. Whatever Decline had promised her before I got here, whatever the promise was, it had been the last thread holding her decision in place. And now it was gone. In 8 of the 16 playthroughs I had personally run, Julie was directly responsible for this character's death. But I knew, from the story documentation, from the lore I had read, that she didn't want to kill him. She wanted him to be different. She had been waiting for evidence that he could be. He never gave it to her. He never would have. That was who he was. But I wasn't him. The problem was that she didn't know that. From where she was standing, I was still Decline. The same face, the same voice, the same history of things he had done that I had no way to undo. Because every single one of them happened before I arrived in this body. I couldn't fix it in a day or a week. Whatever I was going to build had to be built slowly, carefully. in a way that didn't announce itself before it was ready. Visible enough, consistent enough, that people who had already decided what this face meant could, over time, start to reconsider. That was the actual problem, not the enemies, the narrative itself. I was playing a character the story had already decided was going to lose. The only way to change the ending was to be different enough, consistently enough, that the story stopped recognizing me as the character it had planned to kill. I turned away from the window and went to find the bedroom. Sleep in this body worked the same as sleep anywhere. You close your eyes, and eventually the day stops. The next morning I was at my desk in the tower by 7. Early enough that the building was still half empty, and the only sound was the ventilation system doing its job. Alan arrived at 7:15 with coffee, actual coffee. Slightly different in this world, but functionally identical, and a stack of correspondence that had piled up during my week-long absence. I went through it. Most of it was academic, boring in the exact same way academic correspondence is boring everywhere. I went through it methodically. Most of it was academic, requests for consultations, invitations to research panels, a letter from the university board about funding allocations, normal professor correspondence. Then I found one that was different. No institutional crest, no sender information. The handwriting on the outside precise and deliberate. A sealed letter. No institutional crest. The handwriting on the outside was precise, controlled. The kind of handwriting that belongs to someone who has trained their hands to be exact in everything they do. Inside, one line. No name, no crest, nothing else. You answered her question. I noticed. I read it twice and then set it down. That was it. Nothing else. I read it twice. Then I set it on the desk and looked at it from a slight distance. The way you look at something you're not sure how to categorize. Someone had watched the lecture. Someone had watched the moment with Efren Luna, the formula, the answer, the way I had responded, and had decided to send me a note about it. Someone who wrote with enough control to keep their handwriting anonymous, but not quite anonymous enough to hide that it was trained. I had no idea who it was. And in a world full of people who had reasons to watch this character, that uncertainty was worth paying attention to. I filed the letter in the desk drawer and kept moving. Mid-morning, Alan brought me another piece of news. Quieter this time, more careful. The sponsorship allocation went through, he said, from the doorway. The anonymous one, for the students on the list. Good. Efren Luna's was included. I know. Alan stood in the doorway for another moment. She hasn't checked it yet. The notification goes to the tower's administrative system. She'll see it when she logs in. That's fine, I said, without looking up from what I was reading. He stayed another few seconds. Then, Professor, can I ask something? I looked up. Go ahead. Why are you doing this? The sponsorships. The answer you gave her at the lecture. He stopped, started again. The real Decline. Professor Decline. He wouldn't have done any of this. The real Decline. I sat with that phrase for a moment. People change, I said. It was the simplest true thing I could say. Alan looked at me for a long time. The look of someone trying to decide whether they believe something or not. Then he nodded, once, and went back to his desk. I looked at the window, at the campus below, at the distant shape of the Midge Tower's upper floors catching the morning light. People change, or people get replaced by someone else who makes different choices using the same face. Either description was accurate enough for the current situation. From the outside, the result was identical. Behavior that didn't match expectations, slowly accumulating until the expectations themselves had to change. That was the plan. That was the only plan that made sense. Around noon, I took a walk. Alan followed at the standard distance, close enough to be present, far enough not to be in the way. I walked through the campus gardens, because Decline apparently walked through the campus gardens when he wanted to think. Another thing the body knew that I was just now finding out about. Near the eastern path, I saw Efren Luna again. She was sitting on the same bench as yesterday, but her posture was different. Yesterday she was processing something, working through the lecture hall situation. Today she was sitting like someone who had just received a piece of information and was figuring out how to feel about it. She had checked the administrative system. I kept walking, same direction, same pace. She saw me and stood up, because standing was apparently her automatic response to seeing this face in a situation where she had things to say. That sponsorship, she said. I stopped. What about it? As anonymous. She said it like an accusation. The administrative system shows an anonymous institutional allocation. 10 million on. She paused. That's the exact amount I requested. Interesting, I said. It came through this morning, she said. The same morning after you. She stopped. Started differently. You told me about the formula. At the lecture. The binding layer. I told everyone in that hall about the formula. I said, keeping my voice even. It was a public answer to a public question. You told me specifically about the binding layer. After the lecture. In the corridor. Her green eyes were doing the thing where they were evaluating everything simultaneously. Nobody else knew to look at that specifically. I checked. I went back and reconstructed the formula from the beginning, and the binding layer is exactly where the complexity is. You knew exactly where the complexity was without examining it for more than 2 seconds. I didn't respond to that, because there was nothing to say that would help. And now there's an anonymous 10 million own allocation with my name on it. Her voice was controlled, but there was something underneath the control. I'm not stupid. I know what anonymous means in this building. I know who has the access level to route allocations that way. Then you already have a theory, I said. I want to hear you say it. I looked at her, the girl who had stood in a lecture hall full of people and refused to sit back down, who had reconstructed a magic formula from a brief answer given in a corridor. She wasn't going to accept a deflection. She had already thought through every possible deflection and ruled them out before she stood up from the bench. The money doesn't come with conditions, I said. It doesn't come with my name on it. It doesn't come with any obligation to me, to the tower, or to anyone else. Use it or don't. That's your decision. She stared at me. Something was moving behind her eyes that she was working very hard to keep off her face. Why? She said simple direct. The only question that actually mattered. And here was the thing. I couldn't tell her the truth. I couldn't say. Because I build this world and I know what you become in it, and I'm not going to let this character's history follow you. I couldn't say any of that, so I said the other true thing instead. Because you have more potential than most people in this building combined, and someone should have told you that before now. Efren Luna looked at me for a long moment. Then she turned and walked away without saying anything else. I watched her go. Alan appeared at my shoulder, quiet as always. That went well, I said. She didn't throw anything, Alan offered, setting the bar low. Alan, with respect, Professor. For her, not throwing anything is very good. I laughed, unexpectedly. The kind of laugh that comes out before you decided to let it, a real one, loose, and unguarded in a way that declines 13 personality tags have been preventing since I arrived. Alan looked startled, genuinely startled, like he had been standing next to this face for 3 years, and had never once heard it make that particular sound before. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe he hadn't. We walked back toward the tower. The afternoon was warm. The campus was full of students moving between classes. The normal rhythm of a place where people came to learn things and mostly succeeded at it. I thought about the sealed letter in my desk drawer, about Julie in the hallway, making her decision, about Efren Luna walking away just now with 10 million on, and an answer she didn't know what to do with. Small moves, different choices, a slow accumulation of behavior that didn't match what this character was supposed to be. It wasn't enough yet, not even close. There were people in this world with serious power and serious intentions, and what I had done today was not going to change what they were planning. But it was a start, and in a game where the ending wasn't guaranteed, where I had personally watched the character I was now being die in 15 out of 16 runs. A start was not nothing, but it was a start, and in a game with no guaranteed ending. Sometimes a start was the only thing you had. Alan, I said, as we reached the tower entrance. Yes, Professor. I thought about what to say, about the anonymous letter, about Julie's decision, about Efren walking away with 10 million own and no answer to why, about the fact that I was a person from Seoul, living inside a character I had built myself, in a world I had helped design, where almost everyone had already decided how my story ended. Nothing, I said. Good work today. He nodded once, and we went inside, and the tower doors closed behind us, and the day was done.